Morning, everybody. How you doing? I want to apologize for yesterday's video, first of all, because the stupid sun ruined everything. I went back to watch it after I recorded the whole thing, and I'm like, wow, literally half of this video looks like a J.J. Abrams like lens flare moment. It was terrible, and I apologize for that. But I didn't want to re-record everything because I kind of liked how it came out. Like, it sounded okay, and I said what I wanted to say, so I kept it. But I am sorry, and I will be more conscious of that in the future. For today, I told the sun that it was grounded and had to sit in the corner on the other side of the car, so that's where it's hanging out. And so it won't be blinding you, but it might be blinding me. Maybe. Anyway, today is very exciting. We're going to start talking about the Enneagram, starting with type number 1. So there are 9 types, and it's probably worth mentioning early on the way that these are kind of laid out, in that when you hear some of these types, you're going to be like, there's got to be more than just that many types of people. And what Ian Cron says all the time is that you could have the color red, and you could have a infinite number of shades of the color red, but everyone would still be like, yeah, but it's still red, it's just a different shade. And that's kind of how these types work as well. So whether we're talking about 1s or 5s or 8s or whatever, it's not like a thing that's so closely defining a person that, oh, come on, son, that it can't still like be accurate to who you are. It's just going to look a little different for you than it might for somebody else. So let's get into this. 1s. 1s are fascinating and sometimes a little bit bizarre kind of people. Here's their like main characteristic. 1s want to fix and perfect everything. That's like their drive in life. They approach the world with a clear sense of what that world's supposed to be and what that world looks like. And if it doesn't look like the way it's supposed to be, ones have a hard time with that. They don't like it. 1s want to go into the world and fix and change and perfect everything. And as you can probably guess, that is a blessing. Son? I'm getting not as bad as yesterday. It almost looks cool. Anyway, so it almost sounds like a bad thing to me. Like, my personality type is not a 1, and so the idea of something being perfectionistic, I find sometimes confining or strange or irritating. But there, pros and cons. That's what I'm getting at. To some people, it sounds terrible. For other people, it's obviously seems like you have to have it, and that's how a lot of the types are. Suzanne Stabile with Ian Cron, but I hear her say it more on their podcast, is that the best part of any number is also the worst part of any number. It's almost like moderation is what needs to happen for everything, so it doesn't drive people crazy. So for 1s, the drive to want to fix things, to want to make things better, is obviously a great trait, but it can be taken way too far and irritate people or cause friction between people as well. So let's get into that a little bit. 1s should on themselves all the time. A 1 is going to look at the world, they're going to see the way that it ought to be, and they want everything to fall in line with their version of what things ought to be. Now, where they get that sense of what it ought to be changes for every person. Sometimes it might come from religion. Sometimes it might just come from family values. Sometimes it might come from some other life experience that kind of teaches them this is the way things should be. So the downside of that is twofold. 1, they can be really harsh and critical to like other people. Like, if other people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, 1s can come across as being kind of mean and harsh. Is like, this is the way it's supposed to be and you're not doing it correctly, but you should. And that can be really frustrating for obvious reasons. But the second thing that's really frustrating for 1s is they do that all the time to themselves also. Like, they're not just interested in changing everybody else and leaving themselves alone. They are really hard on themselves also. And this was a big, important deal for me, because I've got a couple of ones in my life. How many ones are there? I'm thinking of, I don't know, 5. I think that's from Flight of the Conchords. Might have messed it up. Anyway, I've got a couple of different ones hanging around in my life. And this was a really big deal to recognize that if they were like shooting all over the place, that it wasn't even about me, or it wasn't even about the situation. It was to some extent, but it was also what they did to themselves. Like, they can be tormented souls because their sense of perfection does not stop when it gets to them. They're going to look at themselves also and sit there and say, I should be doing better. I can be better than this. I ought to be better than this. Why am I not better than this? And they can like really beat themselves up over that, over anything, okay? So ones want to try to establish a sense of control in their life. They like things that are systematic. They like things that are organized. They want things to be clean. They want things to be in order. They want things to be detailed out. And if they don't have that, that's like a stress factor for them. They don't like the idea of improving a whole lot of different things. It needs to have a structure and it needs to have a plan. So, ones, let's just recap. Ones need to be nice to themselves. That's the first thing they need to start learning. So some of the ones in my life, I poke at all the time, and I think it's delightful because they take so many things so seriously. And for me, that's not me. I don't like taking things too seriously if I can avoid it. So usually if I hear a one like start shooting, like, oh, I should do this, oh, is this okay, is this whatever, I make fun of them, which might not be the best thing to do, I don't know, but in my brain, it's the attempt is to say there's a level of silliness that's starting to happen, and you can probably fix that by being gracious to yourself. Relax a little bit, because ones have a hard time relaxing. They have a hard time sitting down and just being okay with it, because they're always looking to something else and saying there's something else that needs to be done, there's something else I could be doing, and so that's really hard. Now here's something that's cool about the Enneagram is they kind of give you predictors and things to talk about, like what will happen if you're like really stressed out or if you're feeling really good and secure in life. And for ones, it goes something like this. If ones feel insecure, or if they feel like life is overwhelming, or they feel like they just don't have that control, they become even more critical. They become even more harsh with themselves and the world. They can, I think, get kind of grumpy. They can come across as just being this like cranky person who's like, man, nothing's the way I want it to be. And that's where they go when they're really stressed out. They kind of focus on the rest of the world. They get mad at other people who are having fun when they're not able to have fun right now. So that's really unfortunate for them. On the opposite side, if they're in a really, really good place, they can become super productive. They can be very fun-loving. They can kind of just let it go and just live life. That's hard for ones because there's always something to worry about. So one of the things that I've come across is that a lot of times ones don't ever hit that point unless they're like on vacation, when they are literally distanced from the rest of their life and their work and everything else they might have to worry about. And in those moments, they're just like, life is wonderful. So this is the parallel I thought of this morning. So if you watch Frozen, Elsa's a one. Elsa's a one. She spends her whole life, based on this weird traumatic experience in the past, on needing to be perfect all the time. She is afraid that if she messes up, something terrible is going to happen. She puts all the responsibility on herself. She just is really, really, like, not just detailed, but like, what's the word I'm looking for? Rigid? I guess rigid will work. With herself and with the kingdom and with everything. With her sister to some effect. That's why she gets so mad with her sister, because her sister's just like, I'm going to do whatever I want and it's fun, yay! And she's running around and, you know, whatever. that drives Elsa crazy, because for her, she's like, there is important stuff that has to be done. It has to be done carefully. And that's how she goes about life until she gets away. When she finally leaves and she's all by herself and literally says, let it go. That's like a one anthem for when they're like finally in a good spot. When they are finally at the place where, no. When they're finally at a place where they can just stop worrying about everything, Let It Go is the perfect song for ones. This idea of ignoring all the stuff that you've had to worry about forever and just being able to let loose, to let your hair down. Everything about that song is what ones worry about and what ones want to become, but they are often too stressed, or the expectations are too high that they normally can't do it. And so that's kind of what can happen. If a one is ever able to get away from themselves or away from their responsibilities just for a little while, they can kind of unlock into that. Now, the funny thing, of course, is even when Elsa's off by herself and she's like letting it go, she builds like this perfect, pristine ice castle that only a one could make, because anybody else would have messed something up along the way, but she was so detail oriented. It's still like this perfectly crafted thing. So those are ones. They're interesting, fascinating, sometimes seem crazy to somebody who's not a one, because they seem to care so much about minutia or etiquette or something like that, that some people might be like, no, why do you care so much? For ones, it's the way they have to go through life. It's just the way they see it. It's a way for them to deal with anger, which is always kind of like underneath them, which they don't ever show, hardly, because anger would be seen as imperfect, so they don't want to show anybody that they are not perfect, or themselves that they're not perfect. So usually if they're getting mad, if it ever comes out, they're really mad. Like, it took a while. But anyway, that's a one. That's what they are. So I'm going to let you go on that one. Next time, we're going to talk about twos on the Enneagram, and figure out what's going on with them. So thanks for watching. Go ahead and subscribe. I'm going to put it right here, right there. Subscribe to follow along, to hear more about Enneagram stuff, as well as hopefully a movie review coming out, because I really want to see Logan this weekend. Also, check out my other channel where I talk about English stuff, and there's some stuff over here you should probably click too. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll see you later.